I watch a lot of true crime documentaries, and I have to say, the first series of Unsolved had me hooked. It's amazing. This is a BBC crime series, and as I said, this is the first series. There's also a second series, and I will talk about the subject matter. I will not say how it concludes itself until towards the end of this audio, because I don't want to spoil it if you are watching it for the first time and you're not familiar with the case. But I will let you know when I'm about to kind of share my thoughts on the outcome, because I have some opinions on that. So if you're unfamiliar with this is I think it's a 7-part series. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about 7 episodes. Each episode's only about 20 minutes, which I was a little bit shocked at. But at the same time, it is a 7-parter, and if it was an hour each, they couldn't have filled the 7 hours. And journalist Bronagh Munro investigates this case because it's not technically unsolved, because there is a man in prison for this crime. But it's unsolved in the sense that a lot of people don't believe that Omar Benguit is guilty. So Bronagh Munro visits his sister, who is the one who's kind of asked her to investigate this and find out more evidence against the conviction, because Omar was convicted on no forensic evidence at all. However, there were so-called witnesses who placed him at the scene and who corroborated things that were being said with regards to his behaviour later on that night. However, they were all unreliable witnesses. Not one of them could be considered a reliable witness. And the documentary looks into that as it develops, and we actually get to see some of these witnesses now and hear their opinions on it years later. This was 2002. The documentary was in 2017, so it was 15 years at the time, 18 years now. And basically, in 2002, Young-ok Shin, a Korean student in Bournemouth, was stabbed to death after a night out. And she managed to survive long enough to identify the fact that her killer was wearing a mask, and that's it. And because of one person's testimony, Omar Benguit went to prison. And that's really it. There was no evidence, actual evidence, against him. Not even circumstantial evidence. There wasn't any evidence, just the words of unreliable witnesses. And I can understand completely why his sister would want this case to be reinvestigated. Because even if he is guilty, and I can't say either way because I don't know, even if he is guilty, they could not possibly have prosecuted somebody on no physical evidence. And yet they did. And I don't understand that at all. And that's very, very frustrating. What I particularly like about this is that it's very balanced. When Munro investigates this, she, as the viewer would, switches from thinking that actually he is capable of doing this and he probably is guilty, to thinking, well, maybe actually he didn't. And obviously, as a viewer, when you're watching this, you go through the same emotions, because we learn a lot about him that indicates that actually he could very well have been capable of committing this murder. But then we learn a lot of the reasons about why he couldn't have done, or why he may not have been there, and why the unreliable witnesses are unreliable. And that's what's really frustrating. It's not just the fact that, well, did he do it, did he not do it? It's the fact that regardless, he was convicted with no proof that he did it. And that just irritates me so much. So the documentary is actually very emotional. It takes a complete strong roller coaster ride. It looks into a different suspect. He was never a suspect in this case, but it looks into a different suspect's murders. And there's actually one close-up of one of that person's victims, and her basically rotted corpse, and her hand, and it's very graphic in that sense. It's not graphic in the sense that it's bloody, but you will see the skeletal remains of a murdered girl. And for me, being a disgusting person. I find that very exciting. I'm a crime writer. I'm allowed to get excited by the vivid details in this documentary. But just be prepared that that is something that you may come up against if you watch this. So the documentary, roller coaster ride of emotions. I thought one thing, then I thought something else, and I went back and forth. And it is difficult. It's difficult to watch in the sense that you don't know how to, what to feel or how to process things. But it's difficult because it's exceptionally frustrating and one of the most frustrating documentaries I've watched. I do think Munro approaches this tactfully, professionally, and without bias. Because even when she's maybe thinking one thing, she's looking into the other, and it does provide a balanced view, which is important. So spoiler from here. The documentary itself is great, well put together, really interesting, really fascinating. Definitely watch it. The spoiler bit from now. I was really frustrated with the end of this, because while his sister, Omar's sister, got the developments she was looking for with the unreliable witnesses retracting their statements, some of them, and people saying that this one junior police officer was basically using coercive behaviour. It sounded partly like bribery, partly like coercive behaviour. I'm not really sure, because obviously we don't have the full accounts of what happened. But his sister got this information and they made these developments, and that's good. That's great. But I wish at the end of it we had a conclusive answer. And it's not the documentary's fault that it didn't say whether he was guilty or not, because if the information's not there, it just can't be presented. It's as simple as that. And I did go onto Google afterwards, and as far as I can see, he was never released. He's still in prison. And this was 3 years ago, and as I said, I don't think his sister has got any further with this. And that must be exceptionally annoying. Now, I'm hoping that I'm wrong. I'm hoping that actually he has been released. Apparently there was also an episode on the jury room about him, but I haven't listened to that, but I will do. But it's so frustrating. Yes, there's an article here from May 2019. He's still in prison. Interviews in 2018 on the BBC. He was still in prison. It's shocking, the fact that this documentary has clearly said even if he did do it, there is no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence against him, and that's what makes this or maybe the treatment of him really hard to swallow, because this documentary has clearly presented that there are flaws in this system. And I just wish I could go to those prison gates and shake somebody's head and, just say, look into this case again. And I'm getting frustrated. I can't imagine how his family feel. Brilliant documentary, very frustrating case. If you have any thoughts on this, please do let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. Obviously, it's all just speculation until there's further evidence. But I think at this stage, while they may be able to release him with an appeal and on lack of evidence, I don't think at this stage they'd ever be able to catch the killer. Or, well, yes, it was a murder, but because the body was found, alive, and there was no forensic evidence, it's not like they can find the body or articles of her clothing or anything elsewhere. So I don't think it would be an easy one to solve at all. Great documentary. Frustrating. Let me know what you think.